Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CoronaSphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. This is episode 6 called The Yellow Flag Economy. Not a whole lot of news really to talk about. The main thing going on right now on the 25th of March seems to be this ongoing discussion about when we should restart the economy. Donald Trump is getting an awful lot of flack from the I'd like to say the loyal opposition, but I just don't believe that's true anymore. About whether or not and when or how to begin to switch from one timer, the public health timer, to the restart the economy before it's irreparably damaged timer, and and he's coming under a lot of grief because he basically said, I'd like to get the country going as soon as possible. It didn't mean he's going to eliminate all of the social quarantine rules, but they're certainly making it out that way. They passed the largest spending bill in the history of man, $2 trillion, $2,000 billion, which, of all the things I've ever seen the government spend money on, in terms of social programs, I think this is probably the only one I could get behind, pretty much fully. Anyway, the little bits of good news are we saw a report that said that from this leading virologist, I don't have his name, I'll have it for you tomorrow, says it's looking like that you will get acquired immunity from exposure to the COVID-19 epidemic, that if you come down with it, you will probably get some kind of immunity, at least for a year or so. That's some of the latest findings. And a couple of episodes ago, I talked about taking Johns Hopkins report about taking people who've recovered from the disease, straining the plasma out of their whole blood, transfusing that blood, in the plasma rather, into patients. The antibodies go with it, and it provides what our friend Lord Bios called flash immunity. When I mentioned that 2 or 3 days ago, Hopkins said that we might be looking at a 2 or 3 week period before that would be approved, and 2 days later, it's approved. So that's all good news. Let me just talk a little bit about why we call this the yellow flag economy. I was talking to Scott this morning before we recorded the Bill Whittle Now show, and I was talking to him about how this kind of an economic shutdown is different than anything we've seen before. And I said, I'm not going to mention his store, so we'll just invent a store. But I said, so Scott, if you have a sporting goods store, and let's just go back to before this virus hit. If you had a sporting goods store and it had to close because it went bankrupt, then the bank would want to foreclose on that, would want to essentially evict you, get you out of there. Because what the bank wants is the bank wants the property that they own, the building that they're renting. They want revenue from that building, and so there's going to be pressure to get the bankrupt company out of there and replace it with a company that can pay the rent. So far, so good. But there are two things that are going on here. Number one, that sporting goods company can pay the rent. And much more importantly, there's no one in line behind them who can pay the rent. I don't think we've ever been here before. If you were to evict, just take it down to a smaller scale. If you were not able to pay your rent at an apartment building, let's say, because of the COVID-19 shutdown, the social quarantine, if you were not able to pay your rent under normal circumstances, it would be in the financial interest of the apartment complex to evict you and replace you with somebody who could pay the rent. But that's not the case here. There's nobody waiting to pay the rent because, number one, you can pay the rent. Number two, no one behind you can do it. I said it's an odd kind of thing. It's a good thing. It's a hopeful thing because basically there's a lack of financial pressure to push people who can't pay their bills out of the way because the next guy in line can't pay either. And we talked about that, and Scott said, "Yeah, it's like the whole economy's running under a yellow flag," and that's exactly right. He just absolutely nailed it. I just came out of my chair. Said, "Perfect. That's exactly right." For those of you unfamiliar with racing terminology, when you're having a race, everybody's trying to beat the next guy. Everybody's running as fast as they can. And if there is an accident or debris on the track or something like that makes it unsafe to continue to race at our own speeds, we'll just call that regular free market capitalism, then that debris means that everybody has to slow down. And so they bring out the yellow flag and everybody slows down. But the main thing, the main point here, really the only purpose of this show, and I'm not going to go longer than I need to, the main point about the yellow flag analogy is, yes, the economy slows down. Yes, the race cars slow down because the track is more dangerous. But on the yellow flag, you are not allowed to pass anybody else. You're not allowed to pass anyone. A person in a car behind another car during the yellow flag has to remain behind that car until the green flag comes out and you can start racing again. So, what exactly does that mean? Well, what I'm trying to say here is that all of people's anxieties about not being able to pay their bills, which are certainly valid anxieties, in some large measure are muted, and the financial incentive of the creditors is also muted. Not just out of goodwill, because as much as I think the American people and the whole world is rising to this occasion, goodwill is just goodwill, business is business. But this economy is not just slowed down, it's locked down in relative position to each other. That's actually really quite a comforting thought if you think about it. There is no reason for anybody to get thrown out of their house. And this is, to me anyway, speaking as a person who's been living on the edge financially for most of his life, to me, this is the number one concern, the number one source of anxiety. I think it's the number one source of anxiety that virtually everybody has, is how the largest single expense that people have is, how do I pay my rent? Or how do I pay my car bill? My car payment? How do I pay the mortgage? How do I pay any of these things? Now, with the exception of food, which is important, needless to say, and medicine, things like that, we can look at this lockdown economy and just try to take some of the anxiety of that away, because you're not dependent on the goodwill of other people whose bills you cannot pay. And this is why I think it's clear that banks have already said things. Look, we're gonna we'll do we'll reduce the mortgage. We'll delay it. We'll hold off on it. I just wanted to get this out there, because again, what I'm trying to do with this show is just give people good news to the degree that it's true news. So just you can just let that one percolate for a while. I'm going to do my very level best to not say things 5 times like I usually do, trying to keep this as short as I can. There is no financial pressure and no onus upon you if you can't pay your bills during this crisis. The people who you may end up owing money to in terms of a rent payment or a car payment or whatever that you can't make because of this crisis is not your fault. And more importantly, there's no one who can pay those bills behind you that gives the creditor incentive to kick you out of place. The entire economy of the United States is now running on a yellow flag. It's not just slowing down. No one is allowed to pass anyone. No one's allowed to take advantage of it. And really, to be perfectly honest with you, that's the entire message for today. I really don't think I have anything to add. Certainly, there's no new news that I can see. The talk about restarting the economy is not going to be like turn it back on again. We'll figure out what we can do safely and not safely. I think the president continues to listen to his advisors, and he said he'd like it open by April. I suspect, by Easter rather, I suspect what's going on there, in fact, I'd be quite surprised if this wasn't the case, is that unlike Dr. Fauci and all the rest of the medical professionals around the world, Donald Trump has to worry about the economy as well as the virus. The virologists and the epidemiologists have to be concerned with how can we keep the death toll to a minimum. That's their job. That's why you hear them say things like, we're going to have to lock down the country for 18 months. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And it can't happen. That would be worse than what we would do without anything. It would be worse. You just can't do it. You can't shut down the world economy for 18 months. So when you hear virologists saying, "Oh, well, the president's talking prematurely," we're gonna be in this for 18 months. Prepare yourself. Start digging a garden in the back. What I suspect the president is doing is I'm quite convinced that he's well aware he's going to have to look at this when the 15-day initial 15 days elapses on Monday. I have no doubt that'll be extended, that social quarantine thing. And I think what he's doing is I think he is specifically sending a message to business owners that says, hang in there. He didn't commit to it. He didn't say we're going to restart this thing. We're going to remove all the restrictions on April. That's what people say he said, but that's not what he said. He said he'd like it to be back and running to some degree by Easter, which is mid to late April. Now, if I'm a business owner, and as it turns out I am, I want to hear that. I want to hear that this is going to be over as soon as we can, and I don't want to keep hearing nothing but scientists saying that the optimal case is to lock this down for 18 months, because it is the optimal case. And if you want to go to the optimal case, you lock the entire country down for the rest of time, and then nobody gets any infectious diseases of any kind. Sometimes you have to go to that extreme to understand the spectrum, and that's basically what we're talking about. So anyway, we're in a yellow flag economy. The entire country's running under the yellow flag. Use that as a source of comfort. And understand that there is not going to be credit hits if you can't pay your bills. There's not going to be somebody waiting to throw you out. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen because there's no economic reason to do it. And every economic reason not to do it, put aside good intentions, because good intentions are just good intentions. There's no reason to worry about it. So if you can't make your rent, if you can't make your car payment, to say that the companies will work with you is actually, in a weird sort of way, even overstating the case. It's not a question of they'll work with you like I have a credit problem. No, everybody knows that this economy was humming and then this thing came down. So just try to relax a little bit. And if you're under a yellow flag while you're in a race, I imagine it's a chance for the drivers to unwind just a little bit and just, okay, we're just going to take some laps, and we'll see what happens, and we'll wait for the green flag. That's pretty much it. For those people who've been asking about tomorrow, a normal Stratosphere Lounge Day, tomorrow will be the first edition of the Corona Stratosphere Lounge, or the Strata CoronaSphere Lounge, one or the other. We'll do them both. I am going to be doing the show live, as usual, at the same time. And I'm going to be taking questions. I'm going to take questions from the members-only page at the BillWhittle.com website, because the people who are paying for this content deserve some kind of recognition, and they deserve something for their money and for being stalwart supporters. If I can get through all of the members' questions, then I'll go to Facebook. I think tomorrow on the Corona Stratosphere, or the Strata CoronaSphere, however you want to put it, I will take all the questions I can take. I suspect most of them will have to do with COVID-19, but they don't have to. And I would certainly be grateful if they weren't. It'd be nice to talk about something else. So again, Thursday at a regular time, we'll have the Strata Corona Stratosphere Lounge combination show. I made a commitment to do one of these CoronaSphere Lounges every day until we're at least out of the lockdown. I'd like very much to continue to keep that. So relax, we're on the track, we're going around, we're waiting for people to clear the debris, and there's nothing we can do except just stay in position, go around the track, take a breath, and remember that we are not being pursued by cars that are passing us now because we are forced to go more slowly than we would like. Everybody's going slowly. There is no pressure behind us like that. Thanks very much for joining us. This show is made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com, whose support we've always deeply appreciated. And now more than ever, needless to say, all of these CoronaSphere Lounge shows have been demonetized by YouTube. YouTube continues to choke out our regular revenue every time that we start to get into the 20s and 30,000s on right angles and Bill Whittle Nows. They managed to just ghost ban us down and choke it back down to 9,000, 11,000, 15,000. I don't know what the numbers would be now without YouTube doing their best to make sure that you don't get any other side of the story. And if you appreciate hearing the other side of the story, the only way we can keep doing that is for a certain number of you to just step up and become members because you think it's worthwhile. Anyway, that's it for this show today. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with the Corona Stratosphere Lounge. And as always out there, just have faith, have hope. Things are never as bad as they seem to be ever. It's part of the way our brains are wired. So hang in there, America. Hang in there, planet Earth, and we will see you tomorrow.